could you please introduce yourself to our readers, please?
Hi everyone, my name is E.Orchlon. I'm the founder and CEO of Eureka, and Eureka is a climate tech startup that is trying to make climate investing and carbon offsets more accessible for everyone across the world so that we can mobilize ordinary people and ordinary communities, grassroots communities, to be able to have the empowerment that they can have to do their part against climate change.
Yeah, thank you. So during our interview, we are going to be using the terms carbon offset and carbon credit a lot. So could you please explain these two words in simpler terms?
Sure. So as you know, as a humankind, we've been producing carbon emissions, especially since the industrial age. And that's starting to take a toll on the planet. So put very simplistically, carbon emissions, when they go up into the atmosphere, they create a layer that makes it very difficult for light to reflect and bounce back and escape Earth. So it's reflected back from this layer and it creates a greenhouse effect. And it starts similar to greenhouses, right? And it starts warming up the planet. And that's been scientifically proven that especially over the last 100, 200 years, human-made activities, human-induced activities are adversely affecting our climate. And from that perspective, it's going to become increasingly more difficult for this planet to continue to be habitable by human beings, right? And then what a carbon credit is, this whole carbon credit mechanism was actually introduced in 1997, so it's been around for a long time during the Kyoto Protocol. And it's a mechanism to try and incentivize people to reduce their emissions. So as you know, since the Kyoto Protocol, a lot of countries, starting with the Kyoto Protocol, then the Paris Agreement and the subsequent COP meetings, a lot of countries have taken upon themselves to try and reduce CO2 emissions, greenhouse gas emissions as well. And then, unfortunately, from a technological point of view, it's very difficult, especially for industries such as concrete, mining, airlines, etc., and technology. It's very difficult for them to continually and drastically improve their emissions. And that's why, for them to be able to bridge that gap in terms of getting to net zero, these companies, these countries are able to purchase carbon offsets from projects from all over the world, especially in developing worlds that are contributing positively to carbon sequestration, to CO2 reduction, etc. So, these projects, whether it's reforestation or renewable energy projects, they're able to, if they can prove that as a result of their project, there's a certain amount of CO2 that's being reduced or avoided or eliminated, they can actually get these reductions as certificates, which then they can sell to other companies, especially in the developed worlds, other companies and other countries that are looking to reduce their CO2 emissions. They're able to sell those credits, and the buyers are able to use those credits as offsets against their own carbon footprint activity.
So, on the contrary, some people say that carbon offsetting is just encouragement for businesses to carry on emitting greenhouse gases rather than address their carbon footprint.
Yes.
What's your position on this? What's your take?
It's a good question. So since the 1997 establishment of carbon trading, last year there was almost $1 trillion of carbon credits sold all over the world, 857 billion, I think. The world of carbon credits, this whole scheme actually hasn't worked as well as it should have worked the last sort of 20 years. And the reason for that is there isn't much transparency, there isn't much visibility, there isn't much efficiency in the markets that are focused on carbon credits, right? And if you look at historically, when you look at who's benefited the most from these carbon credit trading schemes, it actually hasn't been the developers, the project developers, but it's been mostly traders and brokers that have sort of, charged very high commissions on reselling these project developers' credits to tech companies, to mining companies, etc. Right? And then oftentimes these brokers and traders, they aren't necessarily concerned about the quality of the credits, and then they bundle millions of tons of credits and then resell them on a wholesale basis to these large companies that are looking to offset their footprint. And there are a few issues, there are a few things wrong with that. One is, conceptually, this whole carbon offset scheme its primary purpose was to efficiently allocate capital to projects that are doing carbon sequestration, right? To make sure that the flow of capital is going to the right projects in terms of reducing overall emissions. So that hasn't been happening. So a lot of the value has been lost due to the middlemen and the brokers and that sort of thing. And then because of that, there hasn't been much transparency. There hasn't been much established pricing mechanisms. So historically, even very high quality carbon offsets, and what I mean by that is very legitimate projects that are proven to have reduced CO2 or mitigated CO2, and are actually playing a very tangible and concrete part in helping reduce overall emissions. The price for their carbon credits has actually been really low as well. And that's why I think, companies that have made pledges to go carbon neutral, buying carbon credits has become the easy way out historically for a lot of these companies, right? So instead of investing tens and hundreds of millions of dollars into actually decarbonizing their own operations and reducing and limiting their carbon footprint, what a lot of companies have done is they've just chosen to buy these cheap credits and then use them as claims to have offset against their footprint, right? So I think because of this, as you said, there's been a lot of greenwashing that's been done historically. We're starting to see a shift in that, in the sense that the price of carbon credits is increasing. So I think 5-6 years ago, the prices were depending on the geography, they ranged from 10 cents to maybe $5-10, right? Now we're seeing prices of $50, 100 euros, that sort of thing, which is good. And then I think experts and even the United Nations, they're saying that there needs to be a price floor for high quality carbon credits, and for us, for carbon credits to have the impact that it needs to have to contain global warming to within 1.5 Celsius degrees. The minimum price for a carbon credit needs to be at least a few $100s to be able to have that effect, right? So, and we agree with that, and that's why through the Eureka platform, we're trying to make it much more transparent, much more accessible for everyone, so that there's efficiency in the market, so that there's price discovery, there's visibility around the credit worthiness of the projects as well as their quality, so that we can continue to drive up the price of high quality carbon credits, so that companies use carbon credits not as the first thing they do when they want to decarbonize, but actually a measure of last resort, right? Because it needs to be a measure of last resort. So the way we view it is companies firstly need to understand their own carbon footprint. And that's something that a lot of companies are unable to do as well. So we help companies do that as well. So we help them baseline and understand exactly how much CO2 they're producing. Because without having that understanding, it's very difficult for them to commit to a strategy to decarbonize if you don't know your own carbon footprint, right? So then companies need to first understand and really identify and calculate their own emissions baseline and footprint. And then based on that, they need to put in realistic targets that they think they can achieve towards net zero. And then to get through that, they need to invest into decarbonizing their own operations. And then only when there's a gap, that's when they need to purchase high quality carbon offsets for a premium is our philosophy.
I see. Okay, so before we talk more about Eureka, I would like to ask one more question about like this carbon credit project.
Sure.
Like, why is it so important for Mongolia? Like, are there any specific for Mongolia? Like, because like you just mentioned that like the global needs and demands, right? Like, for example, how is it different from Mongolia?
Yep. So when we look at the last 60 years or so, the global, on average, globally, average temperatures have increased by 1 Celsius degrees across the globe. In Mongolia, it's increased by 2 Celsius degrees. So Mongolia as a country has historically actually been twice as impacted by climate change as the rest of the world. And I think we all see this every day with the desertification, with the extreme weather patterns, and that affects not just the environment, but the economy, the livelihoods of people, right? So because of that, I think it's even more important for us to be able to do our part. And then I think there's a lot of opportunity for a country like Mongolia to use carbon offsets to be able to drive positive change against climate change in a way that sort of mobilizes communities, not just at the government level, not just at the business level, but if we're able to turn carbon financing into a mechanism that incentivizes ordinary people to take up climate action and start doing their part, especially in a country like Mongolia, I think this could be a very, very powerful example to the rest of the world to follow around how they can do their own part in helping fight climate change.
Okay, let's direct our conversation to Eureka now. And when was the company founded? And like, could you explain like more detailedly your company service? Like, what exactly are you doing here?
Sure. So the company was, I think, incorporated late last year, around November. But I guess you could say we started operations maybe in April of 2022. And the centerpiece of what we're trying to do is we're launching a platform for climate investing that anyone can get involved in. So not just corporates, businesses, and governments and NGOs, but we're also opening up the world of climate investing to ordinary people that want to do their part in terms of helping climate change, right? So we're launching our marketplace, web-based and app-based marketplace next month across Southeast Asia. And once that happens, people, anyone, whether you're a large business, small business, or an ordinary individual that wants to do their part against climate change will be able to invest in carbon credits and carbon offsets, renewable energy certificates from projects from all over the world. So we've got projects from Brazil, from Nicaragua, from Rwanda, from Uruguay, from South Africa to Australia that are listing their carbon offsets on our marketplace. And anyone from anywhere will be able to invest into those carbon credits. So I think it's never been done before in terms of providing that level of access to climate investing to everyone. And our job, our mission hopefully is, as I said, is to, through this platform, mobilize and empower ordinary people to start doing their part in against climate change and because I think that's really the most powerful thing that we can do is climate change I think is probably the biggest challenge that humanity has collectively ever faced, right? The smartest people in the world are telling us that maybe in 100 years' time, the planet is going to be uninhabitable by humans. And especially when you start having kids and start thinking about their futures, right? I think we're the generation the last generation that can actually do something about it. Because if we're unable to do something about it, then I think it's just going to spiral in a pathway that will not be, no one will be able to sort of claw back out of, right? So that's why I think, because the challenge and the issue is so large, we can't just rely on businesses and governments and NGOs to stop this climate change. We have to try and mobilize everyone to start doing their own individual bits, and hopefully through this platform, this can be a starting point around getting everyone involved in the fight against climate change.
Okay, thank you. So, like you just mentioned that people, instead of like companies, like people have to play their own parts,
Yep.
right? For example, like for me, how can I become like carbon credit generator? How do you say it? Generator
Yep.
or producer or
Yeah.
some kind of thing, right? And or like not only just carbon credit producer, but also like how do I like offset my carbon
Yep.
footprint?
Yeah, so I think first step is really understanding what your carbon footprint looks like. So that's why on our platform we'll have a calculator that lets you understand your own footprint, how how your behavior, your activities impact that, how you can reduce your footprint in a very practical way that doesn't really penalize your lifestyle, right? Because it's also very difficult to ask people to go vegan, as an example, right? I can't do it. So instead, it's how do we take simple measures to be able to at least proactively do our part. And then, but the most important thing is getting educated around climate change, right? Learning more about climate change, learning more around why it matters, at a policy level, what we can do. And if more people start doing that, then what's going to happen is they'll start asking for accountability from their elected officials. They'll start asking accountability from their governments, from their parliamentarians, etc., right? And that becomes high up on the agenda for policymakers, right? And that's, I think, the most important thing that ordinary people can do is educate themselves, empower themselves to be able to provide their voice in the fight against climate change, because that acts as a catalyst for the leaders in the country and the businesses to take this into a much more sort of a prioritized manner, right? And then from our side, from Eureka's side, so one of the things that we're doing is, so you asked how can I sort of do my part to offset your own carbon footprint. You'll be able to invest in these really cool projects from all over the world that are trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then we're also introducing social incentives and economic incentives for people to go greener. So one of the discussions that we're having is, talking with a very large tech company that provides mobility services, right? Ride sharing and that sort of thing. So one of the partnerships that we're discussing, which would be really cool, is whenever someone chooses to go for an electric taxi option, then they can start accumulating points on the platform and use those points as reward systems later on, right? So how do we sort of, through a combination of investing into the climate as well as trying to have these partnerships in place to incentivize ordinary people just to do a small, when they're choosing, how do we sort of redirect their choice to the more greener option? I think that'll be a very interesting and cool feature that will hopefully sort of start rolling out next year. And then in terms of just helping on the ground grassroots communities be more carbon neutral. So one of the other things that Eureka does is we're able to do what we call digital MRV. And what that means is that we use technology, machine learning and IoT, Internet of Things engineering, to be able to do remote accreditation and verification of carbon credits. So for the first time, actually, individual families and households that are switching to renewable energy, solar panels, small wind turbines, they'll be able to have their carbon credits accredited by us using remote technology. And then they'll be able to sell their carbon credits on our platform to start earning extra revenue. as a reward for having sort of, transitioned to clean energy. So as an example, we're doing a pilot with the Asia Foundation in Mongolia. So we've already onboarded 5 families, some nomadic families, some families living in the Ger districts. So what we've done is the Asia Foundation has helped them replace their coal burning stoves with electric stoves and electric heaters. And we work with an NGO called Gerhab in Mongolia as well. So they're providing very economic insulation solutions for the Gers so as to make sure that there's no heat loss. And then all of the electric heaters and the electric ovens are powered by solar panels and battery systems. So these families are actually, in minus 30, 40, in the coldest capital in the world, right? These families are able to transition from coal burning stoves to fully electric, renewable powered solutions. And then in our estimates, one family, because they're doing this, they're reducing around 10 to 20 tons of CO2 every year by having switched fully to renewable energy, right? So we're able to, using these devices, right, these tamper-proof smart meters, we're able to plug directly into their systems, and then these devices can tell us very precisely as to how they're using the renewable energy for their everyday needs, right? For their cooking needs, for their heating needs. And then we have a machine learning program that is able to verify whether or not this information that's coming from this is true or not. And then once verified, we're able to start producing carbon credits on their behalf that they can then sell to interested buyers that want to buy their carbon credits. So in our estimate, one family in the Ger district now is able to start earning anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 per year as additional revenue by having sold their carbon credits because they switched to renewable energy. And I think that's been a very inspiring and powerful thing for us because it was, obviously we all know climate change is a big issue, right? Yeah. But to be very honest and transparent, especially low-income households in developing countries, it's even if they understand it, it's probably one of the last things they care about because they've got so many other pressing problems. Tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, in a week's time, where are they going to get the food from? Where are they going to get water from? How are they going to send their kids to school? Will they be employed next month, etc. Right? So when you have so much uncertainty in such a short period of time, it's very difficult for you to care about what things look like in 20 years' time, right? So far, one of the interesting aspects of climate change has been, I think, people, you need to have a certain sort of economic means to be able to care about the climate, right? And that's why for us, I think, having that buy-in and attention from ordinary people at the grassroots level, right? And seeing them to start caring about climate change, even if they have difficult lives, right? As a result of this carbon financing where they're able to sell their carbon credits by having switched to renewable energy, that's been a very powerful catalyst. And for me personally, it's been very inspiring to see just ordinary families now talking about climate change, how to wash their panels, solar panels, how to take care of their solar panels better. And, and then I think there's an added benefit that, their living environments, there's much less, obviously, outdoor pollution, but also indoor pollution, right? Because you've got the coal dust, etc., that is no longer there. So it's a much safer habitat for the families, etc. So there's a lot of added benefits, I think, that if we're able to scale this pilot, not just across Mongolia, but across Southeast Asia, Africa, the Middle East, I think we can hopefully really accelerate the clean energy transition at the community grassroots level. And that's something that I think will be very powerful in the fight against climate change.
I see. That's awesome. Really great. Sounds great. So, I'm really curious that are there any specific advantages that Mongolia offer for doing business in this field?
I think so.
How do you differentiate from other same businesses in the world or in the region?
my view on this would be, if we can prove that this is a scalable, workable business model and technological model, this can be if this works here, it can work anywhere, because Mongolia is the coldest capital in the world. So if we can actually get families that are living in temporary housing, girs, yurts, right? If we can get them to just purely rely on renewable energy in the coldest capital in the world, that's something that can be done anywhere, right? In families in Central Asia, in families in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East and Africa, right? So that's, I think, one of our disadvantages is proving to be one of the advantages, in the sense that, because our climate, our environment is so harsh, if we can prove that this works in Mongolia, we can prove that this will work anywhere else, right? And then I think the other thing is, as I said, Mongolia has been one of the countries that has been affected the most by climate change. So I think it's very important for us to highlight that even countries as impacted by climate change as Mongolia are also able to, start these initiatives using technology, right? And then I think the third bit is around Mongolia is a developing country, and for us, still the priority, the number one vision and the mission for this is to, how do we mobilize and empower ordinary people to start doing their part against climate change. And again, I think if we can get ordinary people to start transitioning to renewable energy, clean energy, start planting more trees, looking after those trees, etc., right? And then just start leading some more sustainable lifestyles in a harsh environment and country like Mongolia. Again, I think this is something that can be very easily replicated across other geographies and regions. So I think a lot of the things that we've previously seen as maybe disadvantages, I think, in the fight against climate change, around proving that anyone can play their part in the fight against climate change, is actually proving to be an advantage for us.
Yeah, thank you. So you've just mentioned that your company is trying to scale up your projects into like Southeast Asia and other parts of the world. And also in an article that I have read on your website, you said that you were aiming to become one of the biggest players, right, in the region or like in the global stage.
Yep.
So could you elaborate on this, and where do you see E.Orchlon in, like, let's say, like 5 years?
Sure. There's no reason for us not to be able to become, if not the leading, but one of the leading companies and platforms in this space, because right now this is a completely new industry, right? What we're trying to do, as an example with this, right? This has never been done before. Large registries, the United Nations, they didn't think that it would be technologically possible for individual households to get accredited for carbon credits, right? You can do it on a project basis, right? You can say, okay, we're going to buy 5,000 electric stoves to these families, and then on a project basis, you can get the carbon credits accredited, right? Using statistical analysis, etc. But to actually just plug this into an individual family without a lot of paperwork, without a lot of bureaucracy, without any cost to them, and then for individual families and small businesses to be able to start producing carbon credits, generating carbon credits, having proven that they are reducing CO2 by having switched to renewable energy, etc. That's never been done before, right? And then how we know that is actually we try to find a standard on how we calculate the carbon credits generated by this, and there was no standard because, again, that's never been done before. So we have to, working with our partners, we have to create new standards to take into this account, right? So how do we use technology to be able to produce carbon credits at the household level? In terms of a platform that provides easy access, transparency, and I guess just accessibility to everyone to be able to do their part in the fight against climate change, to do climate investing. Again, that's never been done before, right? So we are probably one of the first companies that are doing work in this space. And as you know, I think Mongolian, especially engineers, are really talented. What we've found out is that Mongolian engineers, software engineers, machine learning engineers, they are just as competitive as anywhere else from a skill set perspective. So we've been able to develop everything very fast at very high quality levels. So we've been very, very competitive in this space. And I think, in 5 years' time, because this is so new and because we're actually one of the pioneers to start introducing this, there's no really reason for us not to be optimistic around becoming one of the leaders in this space globally. And I think one of the key things is that actually it's not just a technology company. So we now have, I think, around 15, 16 full-time people. Half of our team are software engineers, machine learning engineers, and then the other half are sustainability and environmental experts, right? And the reason for that is we need to be able to assure and attest to the quality of the projects that are listed on our platform, on all the credits being sold and transacted. So that's a very important piece, right? So I think, as I said, this is a blank sheet of paper right now. I think we've got some very exciting technology that, not just big corporates. We've got some very exciting partnerships that we're going to start announcing starting from next month. But it seems that our technology, our platform really resonates with ordinary people as well. So I think if we're able to execute well against this, then again, there's no reason for us not to be able to become one of the leading companies in the space in 5 years' time.
Yeah, thank you. That's really awesome to hear. So, and in the previous question, you've mentioned that you were starting some of your operations in April next year, right? Could you elaborate on that? And what are you gonna be starting with?
Yeah, so what I meant was we started operations April this year. So the company was incorporated last November, but really we started operations in April of this year. So in terms of next year's plans, so we're opening up our headquarters in Singapore. Then we're doing our launch across Southeast Asia, Singapore, then Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, etc. And then probably do a launch in Japan as well, India. So I think the next year and 2 years will be very intensive in terms of getting this platform to scale, to do all of these launches internationally across the world. I think we can do it. We have the team. We have, this is an area that's growing incredibly fast and for the right reasons. And most importantly, I think we have a very, very clear mission around creating a platform that empowers as many people as we can to be able to do their part against climate change, right? So I think we have a very interesting set of value propositions that we can sort of offer to the market. And then, as I said, we've also got a really incredible list of partnerships, starting with the Asia Foundation that we're going to start announcing very soon and start leveraging to scale our business across the world. So yeah, I think the next year and 2 years will be very intensive, but hopefully in a good way. Yeah.
Thank you. So, and I'm really curious about the name of your company. When I heard first time, is it an acronym or does it have something to do with like Eureka by Archimedes?
Yeah, so it's an acronym. It sounds like Eureka. So both words by Archimedes, obviously. I think, Eureka stands for Universal Renewable Energy Certificate Accreditor. And the reason for that is, we wanted to make renewable energy accessible and universal for all, right? When we were trying to, establish the company, we, thought a lot about the name. And then initially, we were stuck with UREC, which stands for Universal Renewable Energy Certificates. And then we had our aha moment where we said, okay, we should add an A as the last letter, and then it can sound like Eureka, which in itself is a really cool word, right? The origin of the word Eureka, it's very innovative, right? In the sense that when you discover something, that when there's a new sort of an innovative idea, you shout "Eureka!" And as you said, it originates from ancient Greece. I'm really glad that we found this name because I think for us it's a cool name.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah. So can you like show to the camera these devices? So it is called smart meters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is interesting because smart meters have been around for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is a smart meter that's tamper-proof. Mm-hmm. So if people tamper with it, they want to open it, they want to sort of crack it, they won't be able to do that. Yeah. It's connected to our servers, and then it basically, it's got a few sensors in there. It's got a GPS module, and it basically is able to monitor whether or not people are actually using their renewable energy, solar panels and wind turbines and that sort of thing, right? And what they're using it for. Because if they're not using it, then it doesn't make sense for them to start producing and generating carbon credits, right? Yeah. So we need to make sure that their systems are actually being put into application and actually reducing greenhouse gas emissions, right? Yeah. The reason why we put this together was I think a lot of the newer solar panel systems and their inverters already have ability to send information to servers. So if someone has a newer version of a solar panel system that is able to send information remotely, then people don't need this device. But in Mongolia, a lot of herders that have solar panels, etc., their solar panels are not able to send information remotely, so that they can just plug this in and start getting verified and accredited. I think the most important piece is actually not this, but our machine learning verification system. Mm-hmm. So we've built, which is quite incredible, we've built our proprietary machine learning artificial intelligence that is able to read the data from this as well as other solar panels and other renewable energy systems, and this machine learning AI is able to verify whether or not someone is actually using renewable energy and reducing carbon emissions. That, I think, is the centerpiece of our technology, and then obviously, I'm still sort of very, very, still shocked and sort of awed at how we've been able to do that. So now we're actually also expanding not just into renewable energy, but into grasslands and pasture lands. So because, obviously forests and trees, they sequester a lot of carbon too. But in terms of grasslands and pasture lands, when you look at the planet from a holistic perspective, they're actually really good carbon sequestration sort of mediums as well. And in Mongolia, obviously, there's a lot of grasslands and pasture lands. And we feel that part goes overlooked. And there's a lot of carbon sequestration and reduction that we can do through sustainable use of pasture lands and sustainable maintenance of grasslands. So we're going to use a combination of satellite and drone technology and use our machine learning systems to actually start verifying carbon sequestration from grasslands and pasture lands and start generating carbon credits and carbon offsets from grasslands and pasture lands. So that will happen sometime in the next second half of next year. So our team has already started working on that, and I think that will also be very exciting, especially for a country like Mongolia.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So our interview is nearing to end. So is there anything you would like to add to our readers?
No, I think, please watch out for our launch. Make sure to download the platform once it's available next month, and, just learning more about climate change, educating yourself, and understanding what position you should take, getting that level of empowerment. That's the first step, and it's the most important step. So I think I would advise and ask everyone to just, invest into themselves to learn about exactly what's happening in the climate change space, and then, what are very simple things that ordinary people like you and me can actually do to do our part in the fight against climate change. And it starts with ourselves. And I think, if everyone does that, I think that can, in and of itself, also have a very profound impact in the fight against climate change.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed talking with you.